Graphing sine and cosine part 2. We're still in section 4.4 in your textbook. We're going to be looking at phase shifts and vertical shifts. Vertical shifts of sine and cosine, phase shifts of sine and cosine, graphing them both together and graphing all the transformations. We're going to get through all of that in this video. Alright, so quick review that if we want to know where the amplitude is, we're looking at the absolute value of A. And if we want to know what the period is, we're looking at 2 pi over the absolute value of B. And as another reminder, those letters come from these standard forms of the equations down here. So if D is greater than 0, so if D is positive, we're going to go up. And if D is negative, we're going to move down. So here's 2 examples of vertical shift. Sine of x plus 2 takes the darker purple graph and moves it up to that lighter purple graph. Sine of x minus 3, we go from the darker purple graph down 3 units. Amplitude and period stay the same, we just move vertically. So let's look at what this, how we graph the vertical shift. I'm going to do kind of a dotted line at first because we're going to end up shifting second. So my amplitude starts off at, it's 1. The period is 2 pi. But I'm going to be shifting up. So I'm actually going to reach a high point of 2 when I'm all said and done. But we won't worry about that quite yet. Alright, I'm graphing cosine, so I'm going to graph it just like normal. I'm going to break my graph into these 4 little sections here. I'm going to start and end up at 1. My low point is here at -1, crossing the x-axis at those 2 points. Make as smooth of a curve as I can. So I used a lighter color, lighter gray. That's my first go through of the graph. My second one, I'm going to do the shift. I'm going to take this point and I'm going to move it up 1. Move every point up 1. I try not to think too much about what the shape of the graph is because it can be kind of overwhelming at first. Just focus on moving all of the points up 1, and then tracing out a nice smooth curve. That looks pretty bad, but it's got the right idea, right amplitude, right period, right phase shift, or vertical shift. A phase shift is the horizontal shift, and this is the one that's always yucky when we do transformations. Because if we have a positive value here, we're going to move left. And, oh, typo, sorry, if C is negative, we move right. And it's always nice when our phase shift is in nice little terms of pi there. It's not always, so just be careful. Because we like to graph using radians instead of degrees. Alright, so my amplitude and period haven't changed. We have 2 pi here. Right, and this time there is no vertical shift, so I'm going to just go ahead and use as much space as I can. I'm going to split this in half again. This is pi. This is pi over 2. This is 3 pi over 2. Alright, so now I'm graphing sine. I'm starting here at 0, 0. I'm going to use a lighter color because this is my first run through. I have x-intercepts at these 3 points. Then I have my high point. I have my low point. Trace out a nice smooth curve. But I have to do a phase shift of pi over 2. So since it's plus pi over 2, that's actually going to tell me to move in the negative direction. And I need to move pi over 2 that far. So I need to give myself a tick mark that's this distance, and I need to go left with it because I had a positive C value. So I'm going to start moving each point one by one left. Again, I don't try to think too much about what it looks like because it can be kind of confusing to think about the overall shape while we're doing these shifts. There's This is moving over, and this is moving over. All right, so here it is. And then there's my phase shift. Now this phase shift should look pretty familiar because cosine is actually a phase shift of a sine. So the sine of x is the same thing as taking the cosine graph and moving it over pi over 2. And I think I might have made a typo. Yeah, this should actually be a minus here because cosine is moving to the right, so it should be a minus. Sorry about that. So sine and cosine are phase shifts of each other. They look exactly the same, they have the same period, they have the same amplitude, they just start at different points. So they're out of phase with each other. Alright, so let's just do, I'll do a quick example up here, then I'm going to give you the second one to do on your own. I want to know what the amplitude period and if there's any shifts. So let's start off with this one. What's the amplitude? Here's our A value. We want to know what the period is. Sometimes you use the letter T in physics class. Well, my period is going to be the B value here. And actually, the B value comes from this number here. So 2 pi over 2, which is 2, okay, writing it all out, and we get a period of pi. And let's see, we have a vertical shift of 3, and we have a phase shift of pi over 4, and that's going to go to the right. So try the next one on your own. Don't forget that this is going to be the B value right here. Okay, so sometimes when you're being asked to find amplitude, period, phase shifts, all that, you're going to need to factor something out first. So if you ever run into a case where you have a coefficient here and a C value over here, we need to factor first. So what that looks like, and this one you're going to do on your own, what that looks like is we're going to factor a 2 out. Well, actually, let me rewrite the whole thing. We have 3 sine. I'm going to factor out the coefficient 2. So that's going to leave x in the first spot here. But when I factor a 2 out of pi over 2, that's going to leave me with minus pi over 4. Because 2 times pi over 2, let me just do that. Sorry, 2 times pi over 4 would be 2 pi over 4, which is the same thing as pi over 2. So that gets me back to my original. And then the plus 7 stays the same. So the amplitude is 3. The period is 2 pi over, P equals 2 pi over 2, which is equal to pi. We have a vertical shift of 7 and going up, and we have a phase shift of, and we're going to use this value here, or sorry, not that value, we're going to use this value here for our phase shift. So we're going to go pi over 4 to the right. So you're going to do this one. And sometimes you'll be asked to write an equation given some of the characteristics. So if A is 2, we know that that's going to be our amplitude. And it says it's cosine, so we have 2 cosine. Our period is 8 pi, so 8 pi is equal to 2 pi over b. So doing a little bit of rearranging here, b is going to be 1/4. H and K, I should have written those differently. And that's going to be D equals 1. So we have a B value of 1/4. We have a C value of 1. And we have a K or a D value of 1 as well. So there's the full equation. Okay, so that's it. I know, again, another long one. I apologize, there's just a lot to this.